Good morning. On behalf of Attorney Jimeno, this is Gerg Cahiles. The pros and cons of the groundbreaking 200 peso legislated wage hike here at the forefront. The House of Representatives has approved the 200 peso wage increase bill in its third and final reading. If enacted into law, the daily minimum wage of 645 pesos in Metro Manila will increase to 845 pesos, given to private sector workers regardless of whether they're regular or contractual. Labor groups welcome the bold move despite falling short of their suggested proposal, since this is the first legislative wage hike since 1989. The Senate unanimously approved its own 100 peso wage hike in February 2024. And so, House Speaker Martin Romualdez deferred the House bill to the wisdom and sound discretion of the plenary. The national wage-setting body, meanwhile, is studying on the bill's economic feasibility and implementation impact. An independent research group, on the other hand, emphasizes that this is a vital step toward achieving a more considerate family living wage nationwide. Will this long-awaited wage hike uplift workers' struggle with the diminishing value of the peso? Or will this put struggling businesses to more layoffs and price increase just to keep afloat? Live at the BNC studio, IBON Foundation Executive Director Sonny Africa. Good morning, Sonny.
Morning, George.
Oh, well, pag-usapan natin itong 200 pesos no,
Yep.
na proposed legislative wage hike.
Yep.
Your comment first.
Well, bottom line, not enough, but a huge leap forward. If implemented, it'll be the first legislative wage hike since 1989. And if put at 200, it'll be even bigger than the first legislative wage hike of 25 pesos from 64 to 89 pesos. So if it happens, kind of historic, I think, and a big help to workers and their families.
But personally, do you think this will pass the bicameral conference meeting?
Actually, just found out now that they're in BICAM. I think the president needs it. He's struggling quite hard to sort of shore up his popularity. I think this, if he passes it at 200, that's a big boost to his image, maybe at least.
But of course, ang pinag-uusapan dito, ano bang mananaig? Yung Senate version o yung House version? O magkakaroon sila ng siguro compromise? What do you think?
Well, the cheat way to do it is just get the average to 150. But the thing is, they shouldn't go that low. And our bigger problem actually is when the president in May 1, he said he preferred the regional wage boards. He was going to seek their advice. The problem is the RWBs have not been giving wage hikes commensurate to inflation increases. When we tracked 17 regions since 1989, we tracked minimum wage hikes versus inflation. In 16 out of 17 regions, the minimum wage now is worth less than in 1989. On average, about 23% less. The only exception is NCR, which is about 3 to 4% more. But that's because they want to moderate unrest so close to the capital. But otherwise, you're talking about 16 out of 17 regions really left behind by the RWBs.
Ayun na nga yung problema kasi kagaya na nabanggit mo, the president said na idaan na lang natin sa regular ways of increasing salaries. Pero with this proposed wage hike, the legislated wage hike, ang fear ng iba ay baka i-veto lang ng presidente.
Well, it's actually quite alarming. I forgot one of the senators said that after the president spoke out, he hardly speaks, but when he finally spoke out, for him to have said that he's inclined to the RWBs, it's a bit worrying that I think one senator said, I think it might have been Senator Bilyonaryo, said, okay, let's tweak it so it's not vetoed. So parang alam yun, instead of talking about how to get the best deal for the workers, it was about a tacticizing so the president wouldn't veto it. And I think, the contradiction of what workers need, and it's possible, and let's work around the president's hesitation. I think that drags down the amount that should be given to workers.
Ano pang ibig sabihin nitong 200 pesos na to para sa mga normal o sa mga regular na manggagawa?
Well, on a monthly basis, I think 2,800 or 2,900 pesos ang dagdag na sa bulsa nila. So malaking bagay talaga yan. And that's even assuming na maibibigay. Kasi about, I think, maybe only half of workers, I think, actually get minimum wage. So, super laking tulong, kulang pa rin talaga, at lalong-lalo na sa amin, sobrang halaga masapol, malayo pa yan dun sa productivity increase nila. Kasi again, if you look at yung takbo since 89, at yung reference point natin, yung regionalization 1989, yung average productivity ng workers has doubled. Halos 90% ang increase ng productivity nila. On the other hand, the minimum wage has fallen. So at the very least, may babalik dapat dun sa workers yung additional productivity nila. Ikalawa, of course, yung pangailangan. I think yung problema about increasing poverty, I mean, SWS na lang tayo magbate kasi the government counts poverty so infrequently. Yes. There are about 12.2 million at the start of President Marcos's term. By the last result, nasa about 14.1 ngayon. So dumami yung bilang na mahirap under the President's term despite all the ayuda, despite all the claims of the fastest or second or third fastest growth in the region. Parang the wage hike is a huge mechanism to correct yung inequity na yan. Because if the economy is growing, if productivity is increasing, who's pocketing the benefit from that? Apparently, it's not the workers.
Okay, pero linawin muna natin, if maisabatas itong 200 peso na legislated wage increase, sino-sino ang makikinabang dito? Ito ba ay para sa lahat ng manggagawa sa buong bansa, private and public sector ba? You can help me explain.
Private sector lang at actually na-dilute. The original bills, lalo na in Congress, across the board So idea sana, hindi lang yung minimum wage earners, dapat across the board yung 100 or 200. So unfortunately, hindi kinaya ng Congress, minimum wage earners lang. So theoretically, dapat all minimum wage earners should earn. Pero may possibility din, magkaka-wage distortion So kung taas yung minimum wage, most businesses naman want may staggered na wage level sila, dapat maangat din actually yung iba doon. But again, it would have been different kung across the board kasi guaranteed yun. Ngayon, nasa discretion ng businesses. If they want to correct wage distortion, baka yung bawat baitang, baka akitin din nila. So that's one thing. Pero secondly, ako nang tatawa ako with this argument na ng mga employers, huwag na ibigay yung wage hike, konti lang makikinabang. Una, it's kind of warped thinking. Kasi kung may matutulungan ka, tulungan mo yung pwede mo tulungan. So hindi counter-argument to say na konti lang makikinabang dyan. Secondly, hindi din totoo na konti lang makikinabang. Kasi if you're talking about roughly 5 to 6 million minimum wage earners ngayon who are going to get bumped up, that's a benefit for them and their families. Secondly, yung magko-correct ng wage distortion ng mga employers, even others will benefit indirectly from that wage hike. But also, huwag kakalimutan, if you give money to workers, they're going to spend it in the local economy, in the informal sector. So malaking chunk dun sa bibigay sa kanilang dagdag sahod, they're going to be spending sa pamasahe, sa jeepney, sa tricycle, sa sari-sari store, palengke, sa bangketa. And you put that same amount in the hands of the employers, bubulsan nila, maybe they're going to use it to go abroad, buy Tesla, or if you're into Musk, you buy a Tesla or something else.
But just to clarify, so ibig sabihin, yung binabanggit mo, sa House version, yung minimum wage earners lang, hindi across the board.
Yung Senate din actually.
Sa Senate din. So ibig sabihin, yung mga minimum wage earner lang. Ibig sabihin, kung 341 sa BARM, kapag naipasa ito, magiging 500 plus sila. Kaya may binabanggit kang distortion dahil maaaring mas mataasan pa ng minimum wage earner yung mga existing ng mga empleyado.
So dapat, ang tendency dyan ng mga employers, angat din yun. Kasi parang may progression kasi, di ba, papasok ka.
Kung magiging discretionary on the part of the employer, kung tataasan din niya yung iba.
Kaya maganda sana kung legislated across the board. At least, mawawala sa discretion sana ng employer.
Okay, pero paano yung mga maliliit na siguro mga negosyo na may siguro limitado yung income? Ang tanong, kakayanin ba nilang saluhin yung ganitong kalaking wage increase kung sila din medyo nagsa-struggle sa negosyo?
Okay. Ito to be clear, pinagbatayan namin yung pinakamalaking survey of mga establishments sa Pilipinas. PSA gumawa nito. Sa PSA survey, yung respondents sila about 39,000, reflecting about 300,000 establishments nationwide. Lumalabas, only 11% of expenses go to compensation on average. Yung wage hike na 200 pesos, across the board, hindi lang sa minimum, for the micro-enterprises, more or less, katumbas sama ng 15% ng kanilang profits. So yung matitira pang 85% ng profits nila. It's a bit easier for the mga large enterprises. It's about, I think, 11% ng profits nila yung 200 pesos across the board. So they keep 89% of their profits. Ang bottom line sa amin, this 200 pesos, if applied across the board, is only 1.8% of establishment expenses. So sa amin, ang challenge namin palagi sa mga employers na nagsasabi, hindi namin kaya mabigat. Una, it's so straightforward to show your financial statements, mag-number crunch tayo. And in all the wage board hearings we've attended, in all the congressional hearings we've attended, not a single employer ay naglakas loob to say, ito yung financial statements namin, we can't. You'll notice, sasabihin nila hindi namin kaya, mananakot, tanggalan, babangkarote kami. But sa amin, it's so striking. Sinasabi yun na walang argumentation. Sa amin, opinion lang yun. And we'd be quite happy to be refuted sa dataset namin. But it's a PSA dataset. Nandun ang revenues, expenses, compensation. Sa amin, it covers micro, small, medium, large enterprises. It covers all sectors of the economy. It covers all regions of the economy. So sa amin, may presumption of regularity. Doon kami magmumula sa argumentation because compensation is only 11% of total expenses, because the 200 peso across the board is only 1.8% of expenses, and applying it across the board is only roughly 12% of profits, sa amin doable talaga to.
Sa mga malls, medyo mahal na rin talaga yung mga renta and baka yun pa yung nagko-consume ng pinakamalaking chunk ng OPEX ng mga
Actually, surprisingly, ayon dun sa PSA data na yan, sa wholesale and retail trade, 4.4% lamang ng expenses go to employee compensation. Ang pinakamalaki, the sector called admin and support services, ang 65%. Siguro mga BPOs, mga ganyan. Which is kind of understandable naman. So, surprising sa nabanggit nyo, 4.4% lamang ng expenses ng wholesale and retail trade go to compensation.
Okay. Now, based on your assessment, magkano ba dapat ang disenteng kinikita ng isang pamilya sa isang araw para mabuhay sila ng maayos?
Well, ako, welcome kung kakusapin yung NWPC, no? Kasi unfortunately, yung huling official na labas ng NWPC na kanilang family living wage was in September 2008. Since then, they stopped releasing. Yung ginawa na ng IBON, we took up the cudgels. Depende sa inflation rate na ni-report ng PSA every month, i-update namin yung original family living wage na yon. Right now, nasa about 1,216 pesos na ang family living wage for a family of 5.
Pero noong 2008, based on NWPC
sa NCR, halimbawa, it's about 917.
Okay.
Yun ang pinakamalaki at that time.
Kumbaga, kung isa lang ang nagtatrabaho sa isang pamilya, earning minimum, medyo malayo pa. Halos kalahati.
Well, right now, yung competition namin dun sa current minimum wage versus family living wage, about 700 plus pesos pa yung gap between the family living wage and the current minimum wage. So, malayo pa talaga.
Pero, well, based doon sa mga pag-aaral ninyo, kung kulang na kulang, medyo malaki yung gap, anong ginagawa ng mga workers to fill in that gap?
Well, again, isa pa nakakatawa. Sabi ng mga employers, hindi dapat ibalikat ng isang wage earner yan kasi there's more than one wage earner in the family. Well, that's because kulang. So when you have children going out of school, kasi kailangan na kumita, when you have yung mga nanay, maliban sa mga sobrang daming domestic chores, nag-racket sila para kumita, sa amin pabigat yun eh. So how do they survive? Iba't ibang klase yan. Marami dyan umuutang, marami dyan multiple racket. But sa amin, the bottom line, kaya super important sa amin yung poverty figures. Because in the end, no matter what you say about, mababa naman ang inflation rate ngayon. Or no matter what you say about, hindi yung aumento na yan, sapat na yan to keep up with inflation. The bottom line, kung dumadami ang mahirap sa Pilipinas, it means kulang ang kita ng mga pamilya. At sa amin, that's, hindi dapat, hindi dapat i-underestimate yung impact of giving a minimum wage, a large minimum wage hike. Hindi lang sa families nila, even sa communities, sa amin, yung multiplier effects of a minimum wage hike is much more than ibubulsayin as profits sa isang corporation.
Oh, well, yung recent SWS survey, sinasabi 50% nga ng mga Pilipino yung mahihirap. What can you say about that?
Well, again, unfortunately, may larger problem yung economy. Totoo naman, yung formal sector natin, out of, sabihin mo, 49 million employed Filipinos, you're only talking actually about maybe at most 9 to 10 million na nasa formal sector sa private establishments. So, ang larger problem dyan, kung bakit mababa yung general income level, because of economy is so backward. We're not industrialized, yung agriculture pinapabayaan. So that drags actually jobs and earnings down. So may larger context na ganon. Pero ang point lang namin regarding the wage hike, ibang usapin entirely what you need to do to industrialize. But even in the current context right now, with the current profits being generated by the formal sector, you can give a higher wage hike. At para sa amin, yun ang tawid to the industrialization. Kasi how do you industrialize a country? You have Filipino industry. What does Filipino industry need? They need a market. How do you create a market? Put more money in people's pockets. If you put more in people's pockets, dapat employers can actually think na over the long term, win-win ito eh. Kasi that creates a market for them, that stimulates the local economy, that stimulates their business, that makes them, puts them in a better position to give higher wages. Tapos ano na yan? Dapat may virtuous circle na makikreate yan.
Pero alam mo, Sonny, kasi laging sinasabi ng gobyerno na gumaganda yung takbo ng ekonomiya ng bansa. But what's the real score based on your assessment as an economist as well?
Well, sa amin, clearly the economy is not doing well. If the bottom line, if there are more and more poor Filipinos, that is not the sign of an economy doing well. So medyo we have to tweak the indicators. Is growth a good thing? If it's leaving people behind, growth isn't a good thing. How do you make growth more equitable in the formal sector? It's so straightforward. Take a bit more from profits, give it to workers. So amin, that will actually boost yung livelihoods ng so many Filipinos. And that is the indicator of economic growth. Not, honestly, it's not growth, it's not even investments, it's not even exports. All of these are means to an end. At yun ang super nagtataka kami, the government spends so much effort measuring these indicators as if they're means to an end. But the real end, lifting people from poverty, kinakapos, di ba?
Kaya nga tinatanong natin parate, kung halimbawa may GDP growth, pupunta tayo sa mga areas, na mga communities, kung nararamdaman ba nila kung anong ibig sabihin nito. Because baka nga mamaya, hindi naman nagtatranslate sa mga komunidad mismo.
So exactly. At sa amin, ito yung medyo weird sa amin eh. Dapat malayong tanaw ng gobyerno. Every business will only, by its nature, look after its own. Okay? It's the government that has the capacity to look beyond your 3-year, 5-year business cycle to develop Filipino industry.
Yes.
So nakatingin lang maraming yun, oh my God, look at China. They've made, grown by leaps and bounds, developed in the last 20 years. Because they had a clear industrial strategy looking beyond the 6-year electoral cycle or 3-year electoral cycle at pinindigan nila to develop over 20 years. And sa amin, ultimately, if you want to reduce poverty here, it's only a micro step lang actually yung wage hike eh. That just corrects yung current distortions ngayon. But beyond that, because about 80% or 70 to 80% of the employment, it's informal eh. Either self-employment or mga sakahan sila. But even those in wage and salary work na hindi covered by minimum wage laws, dapat i-consider na informal yon. About 70% of the workforce is actually informal. And the only way to formalize that is not through regulations, but to create an economy that's formal, which is an industrial economy, naka-integrate yung mga enterprises, like everyone moving forward in a high productivity, high technology way. But strange that the government does not have that kind of attitude to creating a stronger domestic base for jobs, productivity, technology.
Ano dapat ang gawin? I mean, if we could have a very specific actions na pwedeng gawin ng gobyerno to achieve yung sinasabi mo?
Alam mo, the government's talking to the US so much right now. We should do what the US is doing. Adopt an industrial plan. And if you look at the world today, the world economy is so disrupted, the global economy is so disrupted. Bottom line, because individual countries like the US, but actually even underdeveloped countries like Brazil, India, they all want to develop their own domestic industry to create jobs. Of course, marami pang ancillary benefits like addressing climate change, supply chain resiliency, para marami pang national security, may ganon. But bottom line, if the Philippine government doesn't say, okay, we need to industrialize, we need to develop Filipino industry, hindi lang tayo address for foreign manufacturers here. If there's not that shift to develop domestic industry, we're not going to actually move forward and create the jobs and the incomes and have the productive base we need.
Alright. Well, Sonny, i-reserve muna natin yung mga ibang questions for later. We'll have the Executive Director of the National Wages and Productivity Commission when at the forefront returns after a short break. The Executive Director of the National Wages and Productivity Commission, Criselda Sy, is with us this morning. Good morning po, Director Criselda.
Good morning.
Ma'am,
Good
we
morning
wish...
to everyone.
Yeah, we wish that you're here with us po sana this morning sa studio. But nasan po kayo ni ma'am?
Nandito kami sa office. Nag-pull out lang ako sa meeting.
Alright, we heard magkakaroon po ng bicameral meeting ngayon. Is this about this legislated increase sa sweldo ng mga manggagawa po?
There is no official communication yet, but we were earlier informed that we have to prepare in case there is a bicameral meeting.
Alright, so when do we expect that to happen? Kasi meron pang 3 session days bago mag-adjourn ng ating Kongreso.
We're waiting for the signal from the Congress.
Opo. Alright, sige ma'am. Ngayon po, yung House of Representatives, they passed this bill na ila-legislate yung 200 peso increase. While at the Senate, it's 100 pesos. Ano po ang pananaw po ng inyong ahensya tungkol dito?
Ang Department of Labor and Employment through the National Wages and Productivity Commission has submitted its technical report to the Senate and the Congress about it and the potential impact. And all these form part of our input when they made the decision last week.
If you may share the highlights po sana ng inyong technical report po about that.
Well, we just mentioned there that a significant increase in or a substantial increase in the minimum wage may potentially weaken the labor market institutions that we have right now. For example, it may pose problems in terms of complying with labor standards, especially our micro, small, and medium enterprises. It can also increase the informality in our establishments. Yun sana yung gusto rin nating protektahan, na mas marami ang ma-formalize sa ating mga establishments. And if we're going to substantially increase the minimum wage, it might affect the move or the intention of our micro, small, and medium enterprises to formalize their businesses. And also, with regard to the potential negative consequences to our macroeconomic outcomes, NEDA has already submitted also to the Congress their analysis of its potential impact, which may negatively affect our GDP growth, our inflation, and the employment condition in the country.
Opo. Ang pag sinasabi niyo pong significant increase, magkano po yung binabanggit po ninyo?
Wala
Or
naman
substantial?
wala naman tayong binabanggit na amount dito. Ang sinasabi lang natin, if it is not within, for example, kasi lahat ng deliberations ng ating regional boards, they take into consideration the analysis of NEDA. So if the proposed increase is more than the amount that is intended to preserve yung ating macroeconomic outcome, then we call it already a substantial.
Okay, based po doon sa narinig ko sa inyo kaninang mga findings po ng inyong technical study or research, ay puro negative po yung epekto. Wala po bang positibong impact yung pagtaas ng sweldo ng mga manggagawa?
Ang positibong impact nito in the short run, I'm referring to the substantial increase. But if based on our conditions and based on our experience in the past, pag ini-increase natin yung minimum wage natin nang hindi naman mataas at base dun sa mga naging decisions ng ating regional boards ay hindi naman nakaapekto yung mga increases na binibigay in the past sa ating key macroeconomic outcomes. So nangangahulugan na nababalanse mabuti ng ating regional boards yung mga factors that they have to consider as indicated in the law, such as yung needs of workers and their families, the employer's capacity to pay, and of course, the requirements of our socio-economic development.
So ibig nyo sabihin po, kapag utay-utay or maliliit yung pagtaas ng sweldo, ibig sabihin yan ay wala masyadong epekto po sa mga negosyo. Ganun po ba, ma'am?
Not necessarily. Ang pangit naman pakinggan yung utay-utay, George. But what I'm saying is we have to balance yung capacity ng enterprises. Kasi kung halimbawa, bibigyan kita ng halimbawa, ang minimum wage sa NCR ay 645.
Yes.
Okay? Ang minimum wage, for example, sa Tacloban or sa Eastern Visayas ay nasa 405. Kung sasabihin mo na ipapantay mo yung minimum wage sa Tacloban at yung mga businesses naman doon ay hindi kasing competitive ng mga businesses dito sa NCR. So ang tendency ay, okay, tinaas mo nga yung sweldo nila, pero yung mga negosyante naman doon ay umalis kasi hindi nila kaya yung amount ng increase na binigay ng gobyerno doon sa minimum wage. And therefore, ganun din, tataas din yung unemployment kasi nga walang business na gustong mag-invest doon sa area. Bakit kaya, tatanungin natin, bakit kaya walang mag-i-invest doon sa Tacloban kung ipapareho mo yung minimum wage? So titignan mo yung type of infrastructure that they have in Tacloban. Dito kasi sa Manila, yung transaction cost ng mga establishments ay mas maliit kasi nga kompleto yung andito infrastructure. Hindi katulad sa, for example, sa Tacloban na yung transport cost na gagastusin nila, yung labor cost, transport cost, yung utility cost, etc. sa pag-move nung product nila ay mas mataas. So parang walang incentive sa kanila na mag-locate sa Eastern Visayas kasi nga hindi kompleto yung infrastructure. So yun yung reason kung bakit ni-regionalize natin yung minimum wage determination.
So you echo,
depende
ma'am,
sa condition ng regions, depende sa kakayahan ng enterprises na magbayad ng sweldo, at makalikha tayo ng mga trabaho doon by attracting investors to go there because the labor cost is much cheaper than in Metro Manila.
Opo. So, ibig sabihin po, you echo the statement of the President na i-maintain na lang natin yung current setup. Kaya lang po, with the given parang legislative action from both houses of Congress, ay lumalabas po na may 100 and 200. Kung kayo po ang tatanungin, ano po ang mas katanggap-tanggap po para based po doon sa mga pag-aaral na binabanggit po ninyo?
Base doon sa pag-aaral na ginawa namin at sa position na sinubmit namin sa both houses, yung magiging action ng Department of Labor and Employment ay magiging depende doon sa magiging desisyon ng ating Congress at ng bicameral meeting. So ayokong pangunahan kung ano yung gusto nilang mangyari with regard to our existing system for minimum wage determination. So since DOLE is an executive branch of the government, our function is to execute whatever decision our Congress will have on this matter because ours is just a delegated authority from the Congress. So we aming itinataas yung yung power ng ating Congress to legislate wages.
Ma'am, currently, kung kayo po ang tatanungin po, Director, how do you define just and fair wage today?
Yung just and fair wage, it depends. For example, the reason why we invest so much on education is we want to make our workers employable, so that on their own they can negotiate for better terms and conditions of work with their employers. So by that, if you are competitive as a person, then you can bargain for higher wages, and you don't need the minimum wage. The reason why the government is here, the government intervening in the determination of the minimum wage, is just to protect the most vulnerable workers. So yung mga hindi nakapag-aral, yung kaunti yung skills, pinibigyan siya ng protection ng ating government na the moment they decide to enter the labor market, hindi bababa sa minimum wage yung ibibigay sa kanila.
Ma'am, quickly, before I let you go, magkano po dapat ang living wage sa ngayon? Because Sonny here was telling us na 2008 pa yung data nyo ng living wage para sa mga Pilipino.
Yung latest analysis po namin it's not 2008. The estimates that we have right now is based on our own methodology, and our methodology shows that the living wage is at around 900 to 1,000 pesos. That is based on our own methodology as input to the minimum wage determination. It's not an official statistics that is being released by the Philippine Statistics Authority.
All right. Well, thank you very much po, National Wages and Productivity Commission Executive Director Criselda Sy. Now, Sonny, quickly, your reaction to what the director said. Pero bago ka sumagot, at the forefront, we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back at the forefront. What's your thoughts, Sonny, on what Director Criselda said earlier? Sabi niya, 900 to 1,000 daw ang daily living wage based on their estimates. Okay. Your thoughts?
Well, sa amin maganda kung i-publish yan ng NWPC. Ilang taon na kami naghihingi ng official estimate for NWPC, bilaterally invoking freedom of information and all of that. At honestly, until last weekend, wala nakapost na official family living wage estimate, NWP, sa kanilang website. Sa amin, maganda na bagay na 900 to 1,000. Maganda kung i-publish nila. At again, para ma-question din or ma-comment, ma-improve ng publiko.
Pero kung sa perspective nila, kung 900 to 1,000, medyo malayo pa rin yan sa minimum wage sa NCR at least.
Exactly. Tapos, actually, isang secondary action ko nga, may problema talaga kami na pinapaubay sa regional wage boards. Kasi tama si Ma'am Criselda, ang minimum wage para protektahan yung pinaka-vulnerable. Pero again, pagbatayin natin yung NWPC, in September 2008, sabi nila sa NCR, that's how many years ago? 2000. Hindi na ako sa math, no?
Medyo matagal na, like 17 years.
16, 17 years ago. 917 pesos na ang family living wage in NCR. Mas malala sa BARM. 1,322 pesos ang official family wage in BARM. Magkanong sahod ngayon sa BARM? It's about 400 pesos, 371 pesos.
Parang ganyan.
Ayan. So parang, alam mo yon, hindi mo pwede sabihin na yung regional wage boards ay sinusuportahan at protektahan yung vulnerable kung yung agwat na malala na nung 2008, lalong lumala pa ngayon. So para sa amin, kailangan orientational shift eh. Sana ituring yung economic impact ng sahod, hindi sa usapin ng profits or from the side of the employer. Sana naman, tignan nila, sino mas marami sa economy? Yung manggagawa kaysa doon sa employer. Sa amin, that orientational shift is needed at nakakalungkot, DOLE and NWPC, dapat sila nung muna natindigan yung interest ng manggagawa.
Pero teka muna, Sonny, i-clarify ko, sabi mo kanina yung daily living wage sa BARM nasa over 1,000 pesos. Bakit ganun kalaki?
Hindi. Actually, yun ang official estimate ng NWPC. In September
NWPC
2008, 1,322. Yung kanilang official estimate. So, hindi sa amin yun. Nung ina-update namin with the inflation rate, it's over 2,100 pesos now.
Okay, so sobrang laki nun.
Malaki
kumpara
talaga.
Doon sa minimum wage sa BARM, no? So talagang malaki yung hahabulin. Pero sinasabi niya nga, let's just proceed with what we are currently doing. Ipaubayan natin sa mga regional wage board.
But exactly, sa amin, ito, arithmetic lang to. In 16 out of 17 regions, mas mababang halaga ng minimum wage ngayon kumpara sa 1989. Sa madaling salita, kung ikaw ay minimum wage earner at yung magulang may minimum wage earner, mas mababang kinikita mo ngayon 36 years after the regionalization. By any standard, hindi pwede sabihin pag-unlad yan. At yung nabanggit mo nga kanina, nandiyan naman yung economic growth, nandiyan naman ang pasok ng investments, nandiyan naman all the mga pinagmamalaki na hakbang pasulong na ekonomiya. Ba't hindi nararamdaman na minimum wage earner? At sa amin, malaking accountability ng government.
Ay, turn off daw yung mga investors kapag tinaasan natin na nationwide increase.
Okay,
That's what she said.
Alam niyo ba, we keep hearing that. But did you know, the 4 or 5 countries na pinakamataas ang foreign investment sa region, Southeast Asia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, their minimum wages are higher than the Philippines. So kung argumento ay sobrang simplistic, baba ng sahod, pupunta yung investors, the data from the BSP in foreign investment in the Philippines will show, compared to these other 5 countries, mas mataas ang minimum wage nila, pero mas mataas ang foreign investment sa kanila. So again, maraming nuances. Is that foreign investment? To what extent ba makikinabang yung ekonomiya dyan? Pero ibang discussion yan. Ganun kasimple lang. Why is foreign investment higher in these 5 countries samantalang mas mataas ang minimum wage nila?
Ano yung mga trends na nakikita nyo ngayon in terms of stagnation of wage dito sa Pilipinas?
Well, sana stagnation lang nga pero bumabagsak Sa amin yun ang nakabahala dito. Bumababa ang halaga ng minimum wage. So sa amin, kailangan ng government intervention. And I think kung hindi ko mawala yung gobyerno sa pag-iisip na kailangan babaan ng sahod kasi ito ang kailangan pang hikayat ng foreign investors, may miss out yung domestic demand, yung manggagawa, yung families, yan ang engine of domestic growth Di ba sinasabi palagi, we're 70% consumption-driven economy. Kung gano'n, shouldn't we sort of be giving more weight to increasing the power of that engine by increasing yung purchasing power ng mga manggagawa? At sa amin, walang do that. The multiplier effect of that 200 pesos put in the pocket of a worker as opposed to put in the bank account of an employer, walang do that. The multiplier effects of that would be much more. So sa amin, that's the kind of engine we should have. At siguro last point lang, it can be a win-win situation. The biggest problem is most businesses, they want the sure profits. But that's where government steps in. Kung yung window ng profits ng negosyo, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the government institutionally can look beyond to 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Sa amin, kung hirap yung negosyante to look beyond yung short-term profit window nila, it's the government's role to think further for them. At sa amin, the real win-win is put more purchasing power in workers and their families' hands, have more money circulating in the domestic economy. Government should support micro, small, medium enterprises to meet that demand. At yun ang parang walking on 2 legs. That's the way the economy progresses. And it's the government who should look further than that short-term profit window of businesses.
And also, gusto ko lang din itanungin sa iyo kasi syempre, yung inflationary effect daw nitong wage increase, But nakikita natin lately, mababa yung ating inflation rate.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
Well, exactly. Kumbaga, if you're talking about headroom, we have a moment right now, yung less than 2% inflation rate natin, that's headroom for a wage hike. But also, we would actually confront that question na, parang dali isipin, di ba? Wage hike is inflationary. But did you know, 1989, the biggest legislated wage hike in Philippine history, from 64 pesos, ginawang 89 pesos, that's a 39% increase. Did you know, between 88 and the years after the wage hike, nag-slow down ang inflation. So, in the biggest legislated wage hike in Philippine history, inflation actually slowed. So sa amin, maraming factors sa inflation. Kung isisisihin palagi yung manggagawa for that, parang pinapabalikan mo sa manggagawa yung problema ng pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin. Put it the other way, how do businesses price their product? They price as much as possible to get as much profits as possible.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, why are workers said to be inflationary when they demand higher wages, but businesses, when they increase their prices para ma-increase yung profit margin nila, hindi sinasabing inflationary yon? Hindi ba there's kind of a distortion there? Sa amin, it's that attitude nga na we're so accustomed to thinking that workers are a burden. We're so accustomed to thinking that the real drivers of the economy are the business owners. We're forgetting it's a numbers game. Mas maraming workers kaysa business owners, mas maraming nangangailangan ng kita kaysa dun sa mga business owners needing more profits. At kung sila na mag-uusap, they have yung workers. They'll always be scared of demanding higher wages, which is where the government steps in. And I think it's the biggest failure of the RWBs. Tama, tripartite siya. But the fact that minimum wages now are worth less than 1989, it means in the tripartite system, ang pinakinggan ng gobyerno, hindi yung interest ng workers. Hindi yung workers, pinakinggan nila yung pananakot ng mga negosyante. Oh no, magkakolaps sa economy, bangkarote, you're gonna all lose jobs and everything. Medyo it's alarmist na walang basis.
But of course, we welcome the side of the business sector para mag-react on what Sonny was saying earlier. Pero sabi mo nga, maybe wala naman silang pinapakitang datos in terms of sinasabi nilang mga epekto nito sa ekonomiya during hearings. That's why binabanggit niya na baka multo lang to na kinatatakutan natin na hindi naman natin nakikita.
Okay, it might have changed though, but the last congressional hearing we attended, nagbigay ng position paper yung business groups. I won't name them na, but you'll know who they are. They're the ones who speak out loudly. They submitted a 3-page position paper. I'm not exaggerating, I have a copy. 1.5 pages of the position paper was the logos of the signatories and the signatures. The first page was opinion. So sa amin, that goes to show, even yung mga negosyante, they're not taking this wage thing seriously. When they went to Congress with the position paper, they didn't go there with numbers and argument. They went there as a show of force. We are businessmen. We disagree with the wage hike. And that's what they submitted to Congress. And for me, that's so revealing kasi kami, again, we're not going to say tama yung computations namin.
Yes.
We're just saying, to the best of our knowledge, with available data, mukhang kaya nila with a minimum cut in their profits. So all we want is that same sort of respect naman for the workers. If you're going to say hindi nyo kaya, ipakita nyo hindi nyo kaya. Huwag nyo na sabihin hindi nyo kaya.
Well, Sonny, 3 araw na lang, or 2 araw na lang bago mag-adjourn ang Congress. No? Pero saan pupunta to? Itong legislation na ito, sa tingin mo ba ay makakalusot? O saan pupunta ito?
Well, para malusot, kailangan mag-usap yung speaker at yung Senate President. Magkasundo sila na magtawag ng BICAM. Kung sinabi na ni Senate President Jesus Escudero, we're so busy, pati impeachment, the last day namin yan. Actually, natuwa ako na naghahanda yung NWPC for a BICAM. Pero I'd actually be very surprised kung mag-BICAM sila kasi babalik sa kanila yun eh. May oras kayo para sa wage hike, pero yung impeachment trial, ibabump nyo to the last day. So medyo kung masingit nila yan, that'll undercut the argument na we're so busy, kaya namin hinuli yung impeachment trial.
So ano dapat ang mas manaig sa dalawa? Sorry, before I let you go.
Ayoko magbangga. Pero in terms of primary importance for workers, syempre yung sahod. In terms of primary importance for accountability, syempre yung impeachment trial.
Alright, thank you very much, IBON Foundation Executive Director, Sonny Africa. As the discourse for the 200 peso legislative wage hike intensifies, voices from both the government and progressive economists echo the growing call for wage justice. The National Wages and Productivity Commission lays out the state's measured stance, while IBON Foundation strikes at the heart of inequality with data and conviction. In a nation where every peso counts, the future of the Filipino workers crying out for decent living wage hangs in the balance. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news, always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for insights on issues that matter. On behalf of Atty. Jimeno, this is Gerg Cahiles. Thank you for spending your hour with us.